On June 2nd and 3rd, 2011, the Center for Design and Geopolitics held its first annual conference in La Jolla at Cal IT2, the California Institute of Telecommunications and Information Technology, on the campus of the University of California at San Diego.
We will convene then the last panel for the afternoon while the architectures go next door, and then while this is done, we will all head next door for our final discussion for the day, which obviously can be a little bit more wide-ranging. This is, in a way, the data panel, but really it's about, and Larry and I were just speaking about this, about data as world and world image and world making, and this association between the world image, that is the image of the world at once, and the making of a world. And I'm going to go back to the written text here for this last one. The discovery, and I would call it a discovery more than an invention, of computation as a form and format of knowledge has brought not only novel techniques, but an informational ontology which discloses the world as given to digital inquiry. But how does an information ontology change the agenda for the humanities, now less occupied perhaps by human phenomenology? In turn, how does the pursuit of a computational semiosis at the surface of experience transform the performance of identity and the non-identical alike? How has the conception of that cybernetic circuit defined how the built environment can be modeled and constructed as an information architecture? We've discussed, and this word keeps coming back in conversations outside of the Anthropocene, the need to make a world. We have made the world already because we perhaps did it poorly. Now we have to do it again, this time with more intelligence, creativity, and style. To make a world can be a scary, dangerous, exciting, optimistic, cynical, utopian, realist, generous, selfish, intelligent, and or incredibly stupid thing to do. But what does it mean for data to become, as it is, construed through the limited human institutions and languages we have at our disposal, something that is not only a world picture in the Heideggerian sense, but a world, not only ontic, but really ontological. Now, philosophy has had a lot to say about what building a world might mean, and of course, it all doesn't very neatly add up. Husserl and Schutz described experience in terms of a life world, the way that we share a consciousness of things as somehow coherent. And Heidegger examines our being in the world as a background that gives form to the very experience by which things appear to us as meaningful. Closer today, Badiou, Nancy describe in asymptotic ways how globalization has, instead of creating a new world, in fact destroyed the possibility of a genuine world by obfuscating the possibility of radical breaks with the now, and by confusing the entropy of ubiquity with the space of creation. So, because to make one world is also to unmake another, perhaps the real way to build the world is to attempt to unbuild the one that is, or to allow the one that is to properly return. Or perhaps in the gray goo of ubiquitous interchangeability, of art into money, into toy, into energy, into symbol, into JPEG, into art, and back into money, the real building is less to do with what is than to install a new structure that can give rhythm and shape to the global noise. So finally, then, how many worlds? The first world, the second world, the third world, the fourth world, the 7 billionth world, one for each face, each addressable object, each circuit. So our panel today will, again, I'm using this triangulate again around this issues. The first is also my dear friend Lev Manovich, who's really more responsible than anyone for my being down here in La Jolla. Having moved and to move my family here to work with him and to work with you all at this place, and for that I have a debt to him that is real and profound. And so Lev's work, I'm sure you all know, He's the author of Language of New Media, which in 2001 really in many ways inaugurated new media studies as we know it, digital cultural studies as a serious part of the humanities and is going forward. His soft stint in navigating the database in 2005 pushed his work into a whole different series of territories around designing and instantiating an interrogation of the database as a symbolic and environmental form in important ways. Lev also is a professor here in the visual visual arts department at UCSD. He's the director of the Software Studies Initiative, which I've had the honor to work with him on here at Cal IT too. He's also a professor at the EGS, European Graduate School, and has just delivered 450 lectures, which seems probably small, probably a conservative estimate in terms of the number of things to do. So, without more, it's my real pleasure to introduce my dear friend Lev.
Well, one of the things which happen is, you start collaborating with colleagues, Ben, Larry, and amazing Liz Losh, and suddenly, we start working with political images. But I'll get to it in a second. So maybe not all of you realize, but you're sitting in an extraordinary building, which, in fact, directly kind of responsible for this panel, in the sense that this is where the new kind of data routes, the data standards, the data bridges, right, the data vessels are being defined. Right? So Cal-IT2 is one of the world centers in research in grid computing, right, in optical networks, next generation 2K cinema. So this is a world where people are designing, right, the kind of data layer, the data skeleton of our societies, which will grow and become visible 10, 15, 20 years from now. So it's really amazing to be here, part of the future. And when I got into this building and started, attending different meetings, I realized that there are lots of different scientists in these buildings and also artists. But what really unites, biologists, astronomers, geologists, medical researchers, is ultimately, very often today do the same thing. They collect huge amounts of data. This data is organized in huge tables, right, billions by billions of records. And then they use various kind of data analysis, data mining techniques to make sense, to discover patterns in this data, right? So I think we have a new kind of sort of unity, right, of science, so to speak, based on the realization that in dozens of scientific disciplines and soon in humanities and social sciences, kind of the ability to collect, organize, index, visualize, and analyze huge reservoirs of data, right, becomes a new kind of meta method, right, a new method of our time. So what I'm going to do, so Ben asked me not to show too many pretty images, which I think is, you've seen more enough today. So in fact, I'm going to actually read a paper, and the paper is going to be kind of auto critique of perhaps a somewhat too optimistic and too naive vision, which I had 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago, when I started the Software Studies Initiative, which is a very small lab here. And it was a time in 2008 when this idea that people in humanities and social sciences can also now access unprecedented amounts of data about human beings, and this can completely redefine kind of humanities and social sciences. There have been strange people like me and James Fowler, and I remember us having conversations about it, in my coffee cart. We were all almost kind of drunk with this idea, right? So now, 4 years later, every day you get another Twitter about another amazing visualization tool, another amazing data source. There are grant programs, such as already second generation of Digging into Data Challenge. So it's a grant program operated together by agencies from US, Canada, and Netherlands. And US agencies include both NSF and NIH. Right? So this idea is becoming rapidly reality. So I thought that since we kind of had about 4 years to think about it and also done kind of dozens of projects with various cultural and social data sets, it's a good moment to kind of reflect about both the promises and the challenges of big social data. So my presentation is called Trending: The Promises and Challenges of Big Social Data. Right? And I'm going to kind of refer to the description of this grant program, which gives us an excellent kind of summary of this overall assumption, right? Assumption about this new research possibility, right? So the idea behind the Digging into Data challenge is to address how big data changes the research landscape for humanities and social sciences. Now that we have massive databases of materials used by scholars in the humanities and social sciences, and you guys watch the language, right? I mean, 3 years ago it would be unthinkable, right, that humanists would talk about cell phone records, right? But they caught on very, very quickly, right? Ranging from digitized books, newspapers, and music to transactional data like web searches, sensor data, and cell phone records. What new computationally based research methods might we apply? As the world becomes increasingly digital, new techniques will be needed to search, analyze, and understand these everyday materials. So in my presentation, I'm going to address some kind of theoretical and practical issues raised by this emerging kind of big data-driven social science and humanities, and also a new emerging field called social computing, right? Like have computational possibilities and computational challenges around hundreds of millions of records from places like Facebook. And as I said, my observations are based on 4 years of kind of work on small, medium, and big data projects here inside CalIT2 in our lab, software studies. So first part, the optimist. The emergence of social media in the middle 2000s created opportunities to study social and cultural processes in dynamics in new ways. For the first time, we can follow imagination, opinions, ideas, and feelings of hundreds of millions of people. We can see the images and videos we create and comment on, monitor the conversations we're engaged in, read their blogs and tweets, navigate their maps, listen to their track lists, and follow their trajectories in physical space. And we don't need to ask for permissions to do this, since they themselves encourage us to do this, to do so by making all this data public. Interesting. In the 20th century, the study of social and cultural relied on two types of data. What we can call surface data about the many. So surface data about the many is a kind of data used by sociology, economics, and political science. And then the second type of data, what we can call deep data about a few. Psychology, psychoanalysis, anthropology, ethnography, art history. Right? So the first set of disciplines used, okay, there's something very funny here, I'll scroll down. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, nice. We'll get to it, right? We'll get to it, yes. Okay, guys, fine, you want to see? Yeah, this is me in 2003. Yeah. I can't believe it. At least now I completely understand why nobody has offered me a job, right? Because I had websites like this. Anyway. For example, right, a sociologist working with census data, which covered most of the country's citizens, right? However, this data would be collected every 10 years and represented every individual only on a kind of macro level, right? Leaving out his or her opinions, feelings, tastes, moods, or motivations, right? The kind of data available now online from US Census. In contrast, a psychologist would be engaged with, or psychoanalyst would be engaged with a single patient for years, tracking and interpreting exactly the kind of data which census did not capture. So in the middle between these two methodologies of surface data, right, and deep data were statistics and the concept of sampling. So the concept of sampling was supposed to kind of bridge this gap between being able to collect the data about a few and wanting to ideally collect data about everybody. Right? By carefully choosing her sample, the researcher could expand certain types of data about a few into the knowledge, into probabilistic knowledge about many. For example, starting in the 1950s, Nielsen Company started to collect TV viewing data in a sample of American homes, using diaries and special devices to connect to TV sets in approximately 25,000 homes. The Nielsen then used the sample data to predict TV ratings for a whole country, right, which is a percentage of the population which watch a particular show. Well, as it was always clear, but becomes increasingly clear today, now that we have access to detailed data about hundreds of millions of people, the use of samples has many problems. For example, if we talk about TV ratings calculated by Nielsen, the small sample which we used didn't tell us anything about the actual hour-by-hour, day-to-day patterns of TV viewing of every individual or every family outside of a sample. Right? Maybe certain people watched only news the whole day. Others only turned into concerts. Others had TV on and never paid attention to it. Still others happened to prefer the shows which got very low ratings by the sample group and so on. All these people were invisible. The sample stats couldn't tell us anything about it. It was also possible that a particular TV program would get 0 shares. Right? In other words, it was possible that nobody in this 25,000 sample of homes watched a particular program, even though it was shown on national TV, and it would get 0 rating, which of course was not true. Okay. In fact, this kind of scandal happened more than once. Well, so I think, I've been kind of struggling to teach myself statistics and realizing that, in fact, since most people misuse it, even very simple statistical concepts are not so easy to grasp. So I'm not sure if following a metaphor or comparison would be correct, but this is my understanding, right, of the problem of samples. So think of what happens when you have a low-res image and make it many times bigger. For example, let's say you start with a 10 by 10 pixel image, right, which has 100 pixels in total, and resize it to 1,000 by 1,000. So now we're going to have 1 million pixels. Okay, we just try this out, right? Okay. It's not going to be exactly the same numbers, but let's take something small. Right? Copy this. Right. Make a new image. Okay, here it is, right? So this is a new image I just made. And this is our small sample, right? Okay. So now if I go, right, and I make it larger, okay, I'm not getting any more information, right? Well, in fact, this probably was a bit, okay, but probably I shouldn't have done that because in fact Photoshop is trying to be smart, right? So it's probably was trying to interpolate it, but no, still okay. So obviously Photoshop is much smarter than Nielsen, but okay, here we go. Interesting. Okay, here we go, right? So whatever patterns you see, right, in a small sample, I simply get magnified, but whatever patterns which are not in the small samples, become invisible. So I think this is exactly what happens when you use a small sample to predict the behavior of a much larger population. A pixel, so to speak, which originally represented one person, comes to represent 1,000 people, who are assumed to behave in exactly the same way as with one person. Now, the optimist will say, the rise of social media, along with progress in computational tools that can process massive amounts of data, makes possible a fundamentally new approach to the study of human beings and society. we no longer have to choose between data size and data depth. We can study exact trajectories formed by billions of cultural expressions, experiences, text, and links. With detailed insights and knowledge that before can only be reached about a few, now can be reached about many, very, very, very many. Okay. In 2007, Brun Latour summarized these developments as follows. It was an article in the Times Literary Supplement, available from his website. The precise forces that mold our subjectivities and precise characters that furnish our imaginations are all open to inquiries by the social sciences. It is if inner workings of private worlds have been pried open because their inputs and outputs have become thoroughly traceable. 2 years early, in 2005, Natal Eagle at MIT Media Lab already was thinking along the same lines. He and his advisor, Alex Petland, put up a website called Reality Mining. Sorry guys, just did my last class for the year yesterday, and I had like lots of Red Bull, but I think it's beyond Red Bull now. So anyway, so this was 2005, right? So these people have figured it out, right? Okay. And we basically wrote about how new possibilities of capturing details of people's daily behavior and communication, and we use mobile phones, can create sociology in the 21st century. To put this idea into practice, we distributed Nokia phones with special software to 100 MIT students. Now it seems to be a very small sample, just 100 people, but at that point it was like, wow, 100 people. We're going to capture details of their lives for 9 months. And when people used these phones for 9 months, we generated approximately 60 years of continuous data on daily human behavior. Now, think of Google search. Google algorithms analyze text and all the pages we can find, plus PDF, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, Flash files, plain text files, and so on. And since 2009, also Facebook and Twitter accounts. Now, currently, Google doesn't offer any product which would allow a user to analyze patterns in all this data, right? I would like to be able to analyze cultural patterns in the whole World Wide Web captured by Google, but we don't offer a tool like that. However, we do offer limited tools, right, for cultural analysis, such as Google Trends, which which allows you to look at the kind of patterns as represented in what people are searching for. Right? Or of course, you know about Google Ngram Viewer, which does the same thing with digitized books. But certainly it's technologically conceivable, right, if Google really wanted to, right, to give us a tool which would allow us to search for patterns, right, across sort of all of the web. And in a certain sense, that's what Google search is, right? So now people are beginning in the last just a couple of months to create tools which allow you to script Google search, and you can search, for example, for hundreds of things at the same time, and basically kind of stand on top of the shoulders of Google and do cultural analysis of our society. Imagine being able to study the collective intellectual space of a whole planet, right? Seeing how ideas emerge and diffuse, burst and die, how they get linked together, and so on, across the data set estimated to contain, and this estimate changes every day, but according to a PhD student from Belgium who runs one of these websites, when I checked last month, he estimated on the date that the web was approximately 14 billion and 14.5 billion pages, right? So I'm going to conclude the optimist section by just playing a little bit of Google Ngram Viewer. and showing you my favorite kind of little combinations of terms. So since there are many designers in the room, right? Let's find out about the history of design. Interesting. And now if we can play with, we can say, well, what about knowledge, right? What about knowledge versus information, for example? When did we become information society, right? When did we started getting more information with knowledge? Well, let's find out. Oh, perfect, right? Like, what, 64, right? I mean, the funny thing, this is such a primitive tool, right? And it's only accesses about 5 million books, but it works so well, right? So we just want to have more options, right? Anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to put another hat of a critic, in critique with early vision, not because it's wrong, but because I think it's just overtly optimistic. And after 4 years of working with stuff, and also seeing how these things emerge and our labs are working, well, there are certain issues. And 5 minutes, right? So my critique is actually designed to be for 90 minutes, but we'll maybe start the most important one. That's fine. So is it really true that we no longer have to choose between data size and data depth, as I stated? Is it really true that with distinction between the kind of sciences and the disciplines, right, like art history or psychiatry, or psychoanalysis, or literary criticism, right, which would do kind of close readings of people, kind of texts, artifacts, and then we have social, political, economic sciences, which would deal with census data, right? So small data about many. Is it actually true that the emergence of social media, where billions of people voluntarily kind of leave traces of their daily existence, tell us about their thoughts, their imaginations, and the tools which you can harvest, analyze with data, is it really true with these amazing developments over the last decade, collapse with distinction? Well, yes and no. Imagine this hypothetical scenario. On the one side, we have ethnographers who are spending years inside a particular community. On another side, we have computer scientists who never met people in this community, but have access to all their social media and digital footprints. Right? Daily special trajectories captured with GPS, all video recorded by surveillance cameras, online and offline conversations, uploaded media, comments, likes, and so on. So according to my earlier argument, both parties have deep data. But the advantage of computer science team is that we can capture this data about hundreds of millions of people as opposed to only a small community. Now, you may disagree. You may disagree, right? And argue that actually ordinary ethnographers have the real deep data, while computer scientists still have only shallow data, right? So even though computer scientists, let's say hypothetically, have access to, GPS tracks, phone conversations, email records, all of Facebook, for 500 million people or 500,000 people, somehow it's still not the same. It's still kind of shallow. It doesn't feel the same, right? You may argue that no matter how good their data analysis algorithms are, with computer scientists will never arrive at the same insight and understanding of people and dynamics in the community as ethnographers. So I think both these arguments look convincing, right? The argument that both have equally deep data, but computer scientists have more of it, so we win. And the argument, with computer scientists, we have access to some kind of shadow of people's existence. It's not really that deep. Both of the arguments look convincing, and I think both are wrong or incorrect. It may be more accurate to say that ethnographers and computer scientists have access to different kinds of data about human beings. Therefore, we're likely to ask different questions, notice different patterns, and arrive at different insights. Now, this doesn't mean that the new data surface, right, is somehow less deep than the data obtained for long-term personal contact. In terms of sheer number of data points, right, it's likely to be much more deeper, right? However, many of these data points are quite different than the data points available to ethnographers. For instance, if you're physically present in some situation, you may notice some things which you wouldn't notice if you're watching a high-res video of the same situation. At the same time, if you can do computer analysis of this video, you may find patterns you would not notice if you were seen physically. So in other words, what I'm saying is that while you are at this conference physically, and our set of people will be watching highly edited, super detailed, multi-camera video of this conference, we'll basically be attending two different conferences, and it's not that their experience is going to be inferior to yours, because if we apply some image analysis algorithms to this video, we may notice some amazing patterns, some kind of deep connection between the speakers you guys missed. At the same time, you may notice things which we'll miss. So what we have is these two different data universes which partly overlap, but ultimately pretty different. Okay. Now, this sounds logical, right? But still, I'm not satisfied. Somehow, it still goes against all our kind of human intuitions. I can imagine people arguing that at least at present, even the most comprehensive social data about people, which can be automatically captured via cameras, sensors, and computer devices, phones, game consoles, so on, somehow can be used to arrive at the same deep knowledge as having face-to-face interaction with people over long periods of time. So 30 seconds, 1 minute? 1 minute, okay. 2 minutes, okay. Now, I often encounter similar objections when I lecture about cultural analytics research in our lab, right? So we use digital image analysis and high-res visualization to explore cultural patterns in a large set of images and video. YouTube video, visual art, magazine covers, graphic design, and so on. So one of the typical responses to my lectures, so here are some examples. Here, for example, are all pages of a science magazine from 1880 for first 3 decades. So you can see how images very quickly disappear. Right, this is all covers of Time magazine organized by date on the x-axis and by saturation on the y-axis. So this kind of stuff we do in the lab, and you guys have seen this, right? And humanists always get nervous, right? Always get nervous. And they say, that computers can't lead to the same nuanced interpretations as traditional humanities methods, and that they can't help us to understand the meanings of artworks. Well, my response is, of course, we don't want to replace human experts with computers, right? We can use computers to map the patterns in massive visual data sets, even to select particular objects, which then we can examine manually. So while computer-assisted examination of massive cultural data sets typically reveals new patterns in this data, which even best manual close reading would miss, a human is still needed to make sense in these patterns. However, I think that ultimately automatic analysis of social cultural data will not produce meaningful results by itself, because computers' ability to understand the content of text, images, video, and our media is still limited, right? So recall the mistakes made by IBM was an artificial intelligence computer when it's competed on the TV quiz show Jeopardy in early 2011. So ideally, I think what we want is a kind of synchronicity, is a collaboration. We want the human ability to understand and interpret, and computers' ability to analyze massive data sets which algorithms we create. So this is just one of, I'd say, a number of criticisms or corrections, which can be put against this, let's say, optimistic or somewhat idealistic vision of big social data. And I want to conclude by saying that, of course, the point is that, if I was a humanist, I would say, this is so problematic, I'm just not going to do it and go home. And since I'm an artist, right, I'm more optimistic, right, and say that ultimately what we're hoping is to see more people, right, more people in humanities and social sciences who are both experts in their disciplines and basically have a kind of understanding of statistics and data mining on the level of computer scientists. We kind of want people with basically dual knowledge, people like our own Jeremy Douglas. So I have no doubt that eventually we will see many more humanities and social science researchers who are equally good at most abstract theoretical arguments and the latest data analysis algorithms, which we can implement themselves as opposed to relying on computer scientists. So one of the trends which will get us there is digital humanities. So I'm going to conclude my talk by putting this trend into the Google Trends, and accurate or inaccurate as we are, this particular trend seems to be going up. At least last time I checked, but we can check again. Right? No, maybe not. Which didn't go anywhere. Where I was supposed to put this? Oh, Google Insights for search. I'm sorry. Okay, this is the last thing, Ben, I promise. Sorry. Okay, let's try this. Of course, if it goes down, then the whole talk is, have to revise it, right? But this is basically going to be a reality check, right? Okay. So I win. Thank you so much. Sorry, I went a bit longer. Okay.